So we will start tonight with just a bit of introductions. So I am Madeline, I'm from STAND, and I am helping run this. This is for our conscious consumption campaign, which basically aims to kind of bring awareness to all of the different kind of factors in what is consumption. So that is both sustainability on an environmental side, but also looking at it from the human impact side. So looking at human rights, which is obviously why we're here tonight. And then we also have Lucy and Peter who are with us from Fair Trade. So I will let them introduce themselves as well.
Hi guys, my name's Lucy. I'm the project support coordinator at Fair Trade Ireland. I've been there for just over 2.5 years now, and I work on things like fair trade projects, like fair trade colleges, schools, that kind of thing.
Hi folks, Peter Gaynor. I work with Lucy in Fair Trade Ireland and I'm the executive director. So I've been around for about 20 years.
Very nice. And sorry, Bucky, we also have you from USI. If you want to just introduce yourself really quickly.
Hi, sorry, my camera and Wi-Fi is playing.
Good.
But hi everyone. My name is Buki Adebowale and I'm the Vice President for Equality and Citizenship at the Union of Students in Ireland. So I'm delighted to be here today with STAND for this event. So I'm really excited.
Beautiful. Thank you, Vicky. Okay, well, now that we have everyone here, so basically what we'll go through tonight is just kind of look at global trade, what ethical consumerism is, and then we have just a little bit of an exercise for everyone to get involved so you don't fall asleep in the middle of this, because it's very interesting information. And then we will have some slides from Fair Trade, and then we'll have a bit of a Q&A, and then just some final wrap-up thoughts. So I will go ahead and start here. So, I mean, as everyone introduced themselves, we all saw that we all kind of act in this consumer culture. We all buy things, we all interact with all kinds of different supply chains. And we obviously within this culture kind of value accumulating things. Even if you live in the most minimalist of lifestyles, we have accumulated things, we are abundant in things. And so obviously consumption, as we're looking at it for conscious consumption, is that it's both an environmental and a human rights issue. But in our globalized world, we rely on these trade systems and supply chain networks, and these kind of go across all kinds of places. They can come from, it can be something local or it can be from around the world, but there is all kinds of different things that happen in a supply chain. And so obviously these are for the purpose of supplying goods and services to our country. So whatever we need, there's someone or something producing what we need. So maybe a good way of kind of looking at this would be looking at the life cycle of a t-shirt. So everything that we do is processed and it's bought and it's sold and it's taxed and it's whatever, but it all kind of starts in one spot and it goes all the way around. So like if we're looking at this cotton t-shirt, or maybe Alex's shorts she bought at Penny's, it could be that it starts with the harvesting and collecting of cotton, or maybe it's polyester, but we'll look at it if it's cotton in this sense. And that means that someone has to harvest that and cultivate it and make sure that the cotton exists. Then it gets sent on to be spun and weaved, and then it's moved to a factory where whatever is extracted is done and whatever needs to be kind of made so that it actually turns into a t-shirt. It's washed, it's labeled, and then it gets packaged up and it's sent to wherever it's supposed to go. So maybe that means it was made in Bangladesh and it's getting sent to somewhere in the UK or in Ireland. It needs to be transported, which means again that there is some form of human interaction. Someone is loading those things onto those ships or into those trucks, and then someone is driving those trucks or whatever. They're unloaded by people, they're delivered by people. Then they get to the store. They have retailers who are helping to sell these things, and someone is doing the marketing campaign for this, and someone is making sure that it's sold in store, and then eventually it ends up in your hands another human. And, you know, we may end up getting rid of that. We may keep it for forever, but basically every kind of touchstone of this life cycle of this cotton t-shirt or cotton shorts or whatever it is there's some kind of form of human interaction. So basically we need to look at how can we create a sustainable supply chain, a responsible supply chain, when every touchstone has humans in it. It's not necessarily just about the environmental impacts, but it's also about how we interact with human beings. So I don't know if Lucy or if Peter, if you want to hop in there and just say anything on that point.
Yeah, just from a human perspective, I think we have a really nice image. I wish I had it on one of our slides, and it's a breakdown of like a banana, and you kind of look at, you know, how much everyone has contributed to like a banana when it's sold, how much is everyone getting paid. So I think this is a really good example, kind of just a breakdown of like how, you know, so many people are coming into the whole cycle of this one product that you get, and you think it kind of just arrives at you. But if there's so many people, I think we kind of discussed it on Monday. You know, I think there's such a disconnect between consumers and their products and what they're buying. I think we're forgetting like how many people are involved with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to say anything, Peter.
Yeah, one quick one on cotton and banana, something else we consume. I think a third of all the pesticides used in the world, 1/3 each are sprayed on cotton and on bananas. So they're very intensive monocultures. So there's huge environmental costs. We're going to look at some of the social costs. So like how things are produced, where they're grown, how they're grown, what chemicals and things we use with them. I'm still struck by how huge that is for a commodity like cotton or a commodity like bananas.
Yeah. So basically what we're looking at is when we understand that there are huge environmental costs, there are huge social costs, but the way to maybe kind of combat these is to implement sustainable supply chains and sustainable supply chain management. So the goals of this would be environmental stewardship and conservation of these resources that we're relying on, reducing carbon footprints from all aspects of this supply chain, and that ultimately will lead to financial savings and viability for these companies and these organizations, and also the people who are producing these things. And then finally, social responsibility, which is kind of where we tie in humans. So, I mean, it's basically integrating environmentally and financially viable practices into the complete supply chain life cycle. So that means from product design and development to material selection and manufacturing and packaging and transportation, warehousing, distribution, consumption, return, and disposal. So at every step of the way that we're looking at these different costs and how we can reduce them and maybe create a more sustainable world. So I think I've got a video here. Yeah, so this is a little video from Fairtrade. Thank you. Kind of looking at how their system and how if we were to interact or if we were to kind of implement this as our system around the world and all over in every kind of aspect, it would affect the different development goals. So let me know if you can see this.
Sorry, Madeline. I don't think sound is actually coming through, so I don't think anyone
Oops.
can hear.
Well, we'll give you a recap. Thank you. I'm sorry, everyone. That's
That's
terrible
okay.
news. Um, so fair trade kind of looks at, I think there were 8 of the sustainable development goals. There are obviously 17, but I've kind of picked out 4 here that were on that as well, that we can kind of look at how supply chain management and how relating global trade and human rights can actually help with these sustainable development goals that we actually continue on in a developing world. So the first would be no poverty, obviously, which means that the best way out of poverty and to ensure that we can eradicate it is that we pay workers and we pay producers and we pay farmers a fair wage and ensure that all people along all supply chains are provided a decent income and the ability to invest in their futures. The next would be that there are reduced inequalities, so both gender inequality and as well just income inequality in all kinds of things. So ensuring greater equity by increasing prices for farmers and producers, providing financing for development and reducing risks for different organizations as well can help ensure that we reduce inequality. Then I guess there would be responsible consumption and production, which is what our conscious consumption campaign is all about. And that's when producers and businesses are complying with economic, social, and environmental standards so that there is an absolute responsible supply chain, excuse me. And then obviously climate action. So that means that when we're taking a look at these supply chains and we're taking a look at the costs, that we're ensuring that we're increasing resilience to climate risks and aiming to promote trade that prioritizes the most sustainable solution. So taking climate action protects both the people and the planet. And I don't know if you guys want to hop in on here and maybe say a bit about that or about the SDGs.
Yeah, sure. So I think definitely kind of no poverty, SDG 1, 12, and 8 actually are like very much the center of things that we do. I think we mentioned, you know, I think a lot of people think of poverty as a lack of money, where it's actually a lack of, you know, access to education, healthcare, infrastructure, so many, like all of the SDG topics really. So I think that the fair trade premium, the fair trade minimum price, which I'll run through in a few minutes, you know, that kind of covers basic income for farmers and workers. But what also is really important is the fair trade premium, and that funds things and helps farmers to fund, you know, things that they might not necessarily have had access to without fair trade. Yeah.
Perfect.
Peter, you're on mute.
Mute, okay. So, well, we're going to come back to it, but the poverty and climate action, say, perspective, and you know, looking around the human rights area, it's a really interesting and difficult area to, because we know that poverty is the kind of cause of a lot of the denial of human rights. And a lot of the work that's done, which we'll look at later, is to do with getting large companies to be accountable for their business practices. But you know, what we're not looking to happen is for that to be a tick box exercise, or for the compliance costs to be run down the river back down to the primary producers. And when we look at climate action and sustainability in the SDGs, a lot of people talk about you know looking to buy locally, which is really important stuff, like not allowing unsustainable supply chains to flourish when we could be more sustainable. At the same time, if you look at the history of the causes of the climate crisis, since 1850, when the developed West began to invest in its economies and industry and things, something like over 90% of emissions have come from Europe, North America, Japan. And people in places like Africa, the countries in Africa, have contributed less than 9% to those emissions. So, you know, one thing that comes up as well, food miles are really important. Well, I don't think, we'll talk about it later, I don't think not eating chocolate is the answer to the climate crisis. And just eating locally, I think we need to be more aware and have a picture that involves people from all over the world and have answers so that they don't get excluded again as we go about trying to sort out problems in Europe and other wealthier parts of the world. So that's kind of the just transition piece and historical legacies. Thanks.
Great. Well, I think actually we have some slides from you. So Lucy, I don't know if you would like to share. Oh,
Sure.
actually, sorry, let's see. Yeah, we'll come back to this. So if you want to share, I will stop here.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to run through. I'm sure everyone has kind of a very, hang on a sec, basic idea of what fair trade is, but this just to clear things up, because I know, when the word conscious consumerism gets thrown around a lot, I think there's a lot of confusion and it can be quite overwhelming. There's so many different things like, eating organic, buying locally, buying vegan. So this is what it actually means when you pick up something that's labeled fair trade. Just for anyone who's not totally doesn't know the ins and outs of it. If I can get my slides to move. Okay, sorry. Okay, so basically what fair trade is, it's an alternative approach to trade. And we basically were looking at partnership between some of the poorest workers and producers living in the global south, and then people like us in this chat now here, consuming and buying their products. So when you buy a product with the fair trade mark, it means that it was produced according to international fair trade standards. Products are socially, economically, and environmentally responsibly produced. And then the payment of the fair trade minimum price and the premium, which not everyone might not be clued in on. So minimum price is kind of, I think, what a lot of people think of when they think of fair trade. They think, oh, it means that farmers are getting paid more. And yes, in a way it does. What it means is that often things like coffee, they're commodities that often really fluctuate the market price. So basically what this minimum price does, it protects farmers and workers and their families for when, there might be a dip in the market, and it kind of allows them to plan and keep an eye on their future, as opposed to just constantly guessing what they're going to be paid or how things are going to go. And then the fair trade premium, I think, is what a lot of people maybe wouldn't be as familiar with. And that's an additional price received with the fair trade minimum price. And this can be invested socially, economically, or environmentally. And what's really important about this and what sets us apart from other certification marks is that each individual producer organization or cooperative can choose themselves how they're going to invest this. So, it can be in schools, could be for training. Actually, a few examples on the next slide. First one here, this is from Asunafo North, a cocoa cooperative in Ghana. And I don't know if anyone joined us for Fair Trade Fortnight, but we actually had a speaker called Deborah. She was a member of Asunafo North, and they used their premium to do a lot of climate change training, a lot of gender training, and also sometimes use it to subsidize people's incomes. This little boy here, he is in a school that was built by Banalino Banana Cooperative, their fair trade premium, and that's in the Dominican Republic. And then this little boy here is getting water from a pipeline that was funded by Sukhumbizi tea cooperative in Malawi. So a really broad range of, how this premium is invested. And I think that's really important because, we're giving producers agency, we're giving them autonomy to make their own choices in how they want to spend their money. So I just want to briefly touch on climate change. I think it's very topical. Climate can hugely affect farmers. Weather, flooding, drought, all that kind of thing can really affect crop yields. And then long-term effects, the changing temperature, people might not be able to use their land anymore. Seasons might be a bit more off and they might not be able to produce when they're supposed to be. And then a lot of diseases thrive in really hotter climates. So what we're doing is we're training and educating our farmers and workers on how to respond to these extreme conditions by providing tools and just education. We've developed a climate strategy and we have a framework of environmental standards which include pest control and prevention of soil erosion, sustainably using water and suitable waste management. But what we're increasingly seeing is people using their fair trade premiums to tackle effects of climate. So this is Sarit OEP in Kenya. They're a tea cooperative, and they've been using their premium for reforestation projects. And this is from Cobana, a banana cooperative in Panama, and they've been using their premium for conservation projects. So looking after endangered black leatherback turtles and river-dwelling manatees, which I think is pretty cool. And then this is a banana cooperative in Dominican Republic. I'm really sorry, I can't remember the name, but then this is a tool to prevent the spread of pests and diseases, which is very effective. So then in addition to this, the fair trade carbon credit system has been set up. So a lot of renewable energy projects, energy efficient projects like our cook stoves, which I'm going to show a quick slide on now, and forestry projects. So again, more reforestation. So this is an example of the cook stoves that we have been funding, I think, through the carbon credit system. I know they're kind of widely used in East Africa, where a lot of people in the past or traditionally would be using open fires in huts, and that can lead to a lot of kind of health issues, particularly for women, just because of the traditional role that they have in that them societies. So this is a really cool project, and what they use to power these cook stoves is a byproduct of fertilizer that's used on their crops, which I think is very cool, very zero waste. And I'm going to show you a quick video on the carbon credits. I hope you can hear, let me know, and then I'll pass you on to Peter. Can anyone hear that?
Oh, it's probably to do with the sound settings.
Oh God.
It's easy just to link your audio from the computer directly.
Yeah, I thought I'd done that at the beginning. Oh, sorry. Bear with me. Okay.
Wide.
Yep, perfect. We can hear it now.
Thank you. Sorry about that, guys.
It's okay.
There are hundreds of fair trade products sold worldwide, including coffee, bananas, tea, cocoa, flowers, fruit, and even gold. Fair trade certification enables small-scale farmers in developing countries to get a fairer deal for their products. But now, these farmers also face a growing new struggle: climate change. Let's take coffee as an example. Coffee originally comes from Ethiopia, where the coffee bushes grow under trees that provide the shade they need to thrive. But those trees are rapidly disappearing. People cook on open wood fires and chop down trees to claim new land for farming. If these activities continue unchecked, in 25 years, there won't be any forests in Ethiopia left. Meanwhile, humanity continues to emit too many greenhouse gases. The resulting climate change has an enormous impact on coffee farmers. Coffee bushes are extremely sensitive to increases in temperature. With just 1 degree rise, the quality of the coffee is affected. With a 2-degree rise, the coffee bushes yield far less coffee. And with a 3-degree rise in temperature, the coffee bushes struggle to even survive. It is far from fair. Even though the least developed countries hardly contribute to global warming, they suffer the most. And small-scale farmers are hit the hardest. Coffee is just one example. Other fair trade products like cocoa and bananas and tea are increasingly under threat. That's why Fairtrade has developed a new climate standard, working in partnership with Gold Standard, leaders in climate security and sustainable development. Here's how it works. Small-scale farming communities around the world implement local projects including reduced wood cook stoves, biogas installations, and planting new shade trees, to name a few. Our goal is to support small farmers to protect the environment they live in and to become more resilient to the effects of climate change. It's a good start, but it gets even better. Through these activities, the amount of carbon in the air is reduced. This makes our partner farmers and rural communities eligible for carbon credits, which can then be certified as Fair Trade carbon credits. They can sell these credits to companies and individuals looking to make a positive impact on the climate and reduce their carbon footprint. With the purchase of these credits, companies can take accountability for their carbon emissions that couldn't be reduced in their carbon reduction plan. A minimum price for the credits ensures that any costs involved in running the project are covered. Plus, the farmers and communities receive a fair trade premium for each credit sold, which they can then invest in more projects to adapt to the changing climate. Your help in this initiative is crucial. Measure your own carbon footprint or that of your business today and make plans to reduce it. Then, take accountability for what's left over by investing in fair trade carbon credits. The more businesses that participate, the more small-scale farmers and rural communities will benefit, the people most affected by climate change. Support rural communities in their fight against climate change and strengthen them for generations to come.
Okay, that's all from me. I think Peter's going to go over maybe some of the human rights side of fair trade, or if anyone has any questions while he's setting them up, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, so I only have 4 or 5 slides, so it'll only take a couple of minutes. And I just wanted to build on the idea about conscious consumption, ethical consumerism, and political engagement. So absolutely, we believe that the fair trade system makes a significant difference to people who are lucky enough to participate in it at scale, if they can sell a lot of what they produce, enjoy the benefits of minimum prices and premium, being organized, being recognized, and participating as more equal human beings. But it isn't really only, it can't only be about consumption, it's also about citizenship. So fair trade, even where we do really well, we are still a very small part of global trade. We need the business environment and the regulatory environments to support sustainability. So if everyone knows that we don't, in terms of climate change, if we don't adopt significant, radically different approaches and hold each other accountable for things like emissions and hold businesses accountable for emissions, we're not going to change the climate environment quickly enough to meet the targets that we're setting ourselves. And we think the same kind of environment needs to be set for social aspects. And usefully and interestingly, the last few years and currently is seeing a very open environment for the introduction of regulations to make companies more accountable for their human rights in terms of what's called due diligence reporting on human rights. From a fair trade perspective, I think what I said at the start was there's always been legislation, and one of the problems with legislation is implementing it, and it hasn't happened. So chocolate is one of the commodities we've been working on in recent years in particular. But if you look at the chocolate environment and the regulatory environment, there was legislation in the United States over 20 years ago called the Harkin-Enkel legislation about child labour. Now, it was really important, but not a lot has happened, and there haven't been significant changes. There's still estimates of between 1 million and 1.5 million children involved in cocoa production in West Africa, even though we started to legislate to try to improve that situation 20 years ago. What is happening in Europe at the moment is that the European Union is bringing in legislation about sustainable governance and sustainability, and that the proposals they've been consulting on that. So sustainability, human rights, sustainable governance. And we expect them to bring forward proposals around September or October. So what we'd say is, and what we have been saying is, we should vote with our wallet when we're buying things. But it also goes beyond just what we buy. So someone mentioned at the start that they bought a Tony Chocolonely chocolate, which is great. It's a great brand. It's a very strong mission in the world to get rid of slavery across this cocoa sector. But they won't be able, even though they're a very strong brand, they won't be able to do that on their own. So there's lots of recognition amongst companies, amongst NGOs, trade unions, governments, that we need to find a level playing pitch for companies, but a level playing pitch which raises the bar for all companies. But in fair trade, what we're saying is that we need to deal with poverty. So one of the real problems, if you're looking at child labor in West Africa, if you're looking at deforestation in West Africa, I'm just going to stick with chocolate. You could talk about other commodities. But if we're going to deal with those environmental, and people in West Africa, the governments there, NGOs there would say, if you're going to deal with social and environmental sustainability, you have to deal with economic sustainability. If people aren't paid the price, I think Madeline, you were saying this, there has to be a sustainable price paid if we expect other people to manage their environments, social and economic environments, social and environmental environments to higher standards. I think there are something like 5 million cocoa farmers in the Ivory Coast in Ghana, and about 2/3 of Europe's chocolate cocoa comes from that part of the world. And the vast majority of people are living on less than half the World Bank extreme poverty level. So that people are living on $1 a day, even though they grow things, even though they produce something, even though we buy it from them, even though it's a luxury for us, it's far from a luxury for people in countries like the Ivory Coast. So we would say that the European Union, when it brings out its proposals for regulation, should look at pricing, should look at payments to farmers, sustainable pricing. If we expect, why should people in West Africa manage their forests if they can't enjoy an income? Do we really have a right, considering we've cut down all our own forests to build our economies and societies? Have we really got the right to expect people who have much less than we have to protect theirs, to help deal with a global problem like climate change? So a lot of agricultural production is informal. When we talk about cocoa farmers, you're not talking about the kind of farmers you see in Europe a lot of the time, or North America. You're talking about a couple of hectares. You're talking about very low intensity agriculture. And poverty, inequality is always going to cause negative environmental outcomes and social outcomes. So if parents can't provide for their children, and if there aren't schools for people's children, then they're going to be hanging around the house, and they're going to be brought into the fields, and they're going to be working with the parents. So what's needed from buying companies? So what should the governments be looking to do? What should the EU be looking to do? One of the problems with business, trade, development is there's a lot of, as with cotton and textiles, there's an awful lot of quick turnover. People have contracts, they have a contract for this season, but not a contract for the next season. So there's no long-term engagement, there's no commitment between buyers and producers. And even as much as the prices that are paid, having long-term relationships helps people to plan for their households, so that if they know they're going to be able to sell at a reasonable price, not even at a best price, but at a reasonable price, it allows people to know what income they'll have and how to plan for where they invest that income. And when people don't know where they're going to get their money, then it gives them obviously a lot more insecurity. The kind of problems that exist where people are living on $1 a day it's not just the businesses. They're going to have to find more sustainable ways of purchasing things like cocoa and other commodities. It's also governments. If we're going to redress some historical legacies between Europe and the impacts of colonization, issues to do with racism, the neglect of vast parts of the world in favour of wealthier parts of the world, that part of the redress is going to have to involve wealthy governments investing. So if we want to look after the forests in West Africa, how can we get the governments in Europe to help to pay for environmental programs that support people staying on the land and earning an income, but not expecting the people who don't have the resources to be able to nurture and steward their environment. And I've mentioned if we're going to deal with the social and the environmental piece, the economic piece, the living incomes, living wages, we need to start to expect that people have the right, the entitlement and the ability, not just to have a minimum wage or a minimum income, but to have a living wage which allows people to cover their basic needs and gives a small amount extra for discretionary spend. So living income and living wages isn't talking about the kind of livelihoods that people in wealthy countries have. It's talking about, in the context of the Ivory Coast, Ghana, other places, of them having enough to meet the basic needs and just having a little bit extra to invest in the household or education, or to make further plans, or to have something set by in case people get sick. So there is a lot of things going on. There's currently they're all happening this summer and coming into this autumn in Europe. There's the European piece that I mentioned about sustainable governance and human rights due diligence for companies, for organizations and individuals to engage with, so that our consumption and our advocacy and our citizenship all come together. So Fairtrade Ireland is a member of the Irish Coalition on Business and Human Rights. So organisations like Trócaire in Ireland will do a lot of work around business and human rights. The Fairtrade Advocacy Office in Brussels, they do a lot of work engaging with European politicians. So we'll be engaged both around sustainable governance, but also around some deforestation legislation and that piece of regulation for the European chocolate industry. In Ireland, there's a couple of links there, and we can get this presentation to Madeline so she can send it around. But there's further reading about human rights, the environment and fair trade, and then more about climate justice. So fair trade is about conscious consumption. It is about the choices we make. And that simple choice can make a real difference to people who have less privileges than we do, many of us. But it doesn't stop there. It's meant to be an example of how things can be done differently and better. So that when we talk to governments about sustainability, we have some examples to point towards and say that because people have improved incomes in cocoa or coffee who are producing, because they've long-term relationships, because they're able to invest in their communities, look after their environments and their forests, because they have better cooking utensils, very simple stuff, because they've better cooking utensils, that people aren't having to put down as much forestry, and thereby they can have an environment that doesn't get as degraded that otherwise it would. So that's really it. In promoting human rights, which is a really big issue. And in fair trade, we're not able to do this on our own. 7% of cocoa is sold as fair trade. So we can only impact people in direct proportion to the volume of business that we do. So everyone should be actually paying for and working towards business practices that allow people better opportunities. And that's the idea behind having a regulatory environment, is that it makes it, and the bigger chocolate companies and businesses would say this. Companies like Mars and others are signed up to engage with the European Union because they want a level playing pitch. they want to do more and do better, but they want to be sure that everyone's going to have to do more and do better, so that people who do less don't get an unfair competitive advantage. So it's important that we support it. So on our website, you can sign up to our newsletters, Trócaire website. There's the other NGOs in Ireland are part of the Irish Coalition on Business and Human Rights. But seeing that linkage between our shopping and the regulations that support more sustainable business practices is an important piece. It doesn't sit on its own, it fits within a bigger picture. So that's it, Madeline, for me for now.
Ah, perfect. Yeah, so like, as everyone's saying, ethical consumerism and this kind of looking at it it's more than just buying a product. It's you're looking at it as like a form of activism, and that when you're buying a product, you're buying not only that thing, but you're buying the entire process that goes behind that item or that thing. So it's not just the chocolate bar, but it's the chocolate bar and the work that whoever, if it was a child or if it was an adult male, whoever it was, put into harvesting that and collecting that and shipping that and everything. So you're buying the entire process. So when we're talking about ethical consumerism and conscious consumption, we're talking about taking a beat, taking a second and thinking of the entire supply chain that helps us get whatever it is that we want in front of us. So now we'll take just a few minutes here. I know it's actually, it's kind of running out of time, but we'll take a quick second here. We'll do a little bit of an activity just to get everybody involved. So I'm going to send across a Miro board right now to everyone and let me know if you can access that. And if so, then I will give everybody just a profile. And what we'll do is basically we'll have like our hands up, 10 fingers. If I say a statement based on whatever profile it is that you have, you'll put a finger down if the answer is yes, and if it's no, you'll keep your hands up. So if everyone can let me know if they can access that. Are we good? I think so. So if, let's see. So if Carolina and G. Kilcullen will be Susan, we have Lynn and Orla and Sarah. We'll have you as Therese. Alejandro and Alex, you can be Dara. And then let's see, we have Anna and Buki, you can be Fatima, and Lucy, Peter, and I will be Martin. So if you guys just take a second, did I leave anyone out? Did everyone? I think Ava, actually, sorry. Ava, you can also be Susan. So if you just take a second and read your profile, and then I will read out some statements. Okay, so everyone's ready. You can put your little fingers up or keep them down, whatever works. So based on your profile, I'll read out this statement. If you think the answer is yes, you can put a finger down. And if you think the answer is no, just keep your hands up. So the first is, I use electricity each day. The next is, my community is not affected by changing weather patterns or climate change. I am able to save money and plan for the future. I am educated. I have enough food to eat and water to drink. I have job mobility and comparable career and education opportunities. I would consider myself financially stable. My commute to work is feasible and accessible. And I feel safe at my workplace. So if everyone has the number of fingers that they still have up, if you want to put that in the chat, and then we'll have a quick discussion. We'll move on to Q&A, even though we don't have too much time left. I know there's Orla had a question, and I have a few questions for Lucy and Peter, and then we will wrap up. So if everyone wants to put in the chat what their number was. Eight from Ava. 7 from Buki. Eight from, I don't know who the first name is for G. Kilcohen, but whoever that is. So basically, you can see that obviously that there is kind of a discrepancy between these workers. So, you know, I don't know if anybody would like to share as to why they think they gained more or less, or if we want to quickly move on, we can, but this was just kind of a way to see the difference between certain people within the supply chain. I don't know if anyone wants to share, maybe someone with a high number or a low number. Alex says, I put down 8 fingers, if that's what you mean. I got Darren, he's obviously very privileged. Yeah, he's got education, kind of an easy work life. Very cool. All right, well, we will go ahead and move on to a bit of Q&A. So I know that Orla had a question earlier, and that was, sometimes the fair trade logos on a product have an arrow beside them. What does this mean? I don't know if you can clear that up really quick. Or if you know what that is.
It's asking us to look at the back. So if a product is, say, a coffee or a banana, then very obviously all the coffee and all of the bananas fair trade, meets fair trade standards. And if there's an arrow, say you buy a product with an arrow that says fair trade cocoa and there's an arrow, what the arrow is asking us to do is to read on the back. It tells you a bit more about the fair trade ingredients in a product. So not all the ingredients in all products will be fair trade. Sometimes they are, all the ones that can be are, that, you know, we've hit one mark for that. Sometimes it's just a principal ingredient. So it's directing us to look for more information on the back.
Perfect. So I have a question for you. If an item isn't fair trade, what should we be looking for in terms of like sustainability? Like, are there certain shopping standards or like questions you can maybe ask yourself when you go into the store? Like, how can you make sure you're purchasing something that's ethical?
It's a great question, and it's a great dilemma for us all.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna, you know, you can look to organics, you can look to local food production, you can look to other schemes like the Rainforest Alliance, you can look to fair trade, and really what we have to do is inform ourselves. So we need to understand what these different things mean. We could read about companies and their commitments, or, you know, on their websites. So I'm not sure that we can, you know, it's not easy. That's the simple answer. It's not easy. We do have to inform ourselves on what different claims companies and products make. And then you have to make choices. So, like, you know, do you go with something local or do you go organic? That's an interesting one, in terms of food miles or in terms of supporting local producers against, you know, maybe a higher environmental standard somewhere else. So we don't have, unfortunately, the answer for everyone for that.
Yeah,
Keep
yes.
thinking.
Hard one to answer. We have a couple of questions here. We can go with two more and then we'll take just a second before our final question. But Jico Colin, I'm sorry, I don't know your first
No,
name.
it's
So
okay.
if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah,
you can
Grania,
ask your
sorry.
question.
Hi. I was just wondering, this week there was actually some very good news about the company Ben and Jerry's. So they've decided to not no longer produce, I think, and sell in the occupied Palestinian territory. And although this is good news, I was actually really quite surprised that they were operating under, like, in a area where it's linked to violations of international human rights law, where there's, you know, illegal seizure of land. And I suppose I'm just wondering, because Ben and Jerry's is, all their products, as far as I know, are fair trade. Where does fair trade lie when it comes to businesses operating in contexts that are ultimately linked to human rights abuses, and there's absolutely no way you can mitigate or avoid them by having business activities there?
I think it's a difficult question. Ben and Jerry's are an activist brand, so that's a choice they've made. And you know, we would hope to foster fairer terms and conditions for the people we work with. But we don't legislate on where things are sold or bought, or we don't legislate, say, for instance, about who can buy fair trade products. Which isn't to say that your view of the situation in Palestine is isn't accurate, but we're not in a position to legislate on where things are sold or on who buys them in fair trade. That's fair trade generally, so in all kinds of contexts. Now, but we'd still hope that we can do what we do, which is only one small piece in the jigsaw. We're not saying we're the answer to all the problems in the world. We're saying we contribute to answers for the people who are able to produce under fair trade terms and sell reasonably significant volumes. And then I think it comes down to individuals, about the choices individuals make, including companies, but we're not legislating for it.
Okay, thanks.
So before our last question, I'm sending out a survey link and the link to take the pledge on conscious consumption. So we've got one more question and then we will wrap up, but I'll just give you guys like 2 minutes. If you could just fill out the survey for this event, it should take you 1 minute, and then you can take the pledge for conscious consumption. That means you can either take individual action to hold governments and institutions accountable, or action for corporations and organizations. So I have sent those 2 links to you. So I'll just give you about a minute or so there to fill that out, and then we will wrap. Okay, we'll bring it back just for one last question. Peter and Lucy, I don't know who wants to take the lead on this, but if you could maybe give us a definition of what the conscious consumer is and how we can be one.
Do you want to go, Lizzie? No. Okay, so for me, I think conscious consumer is someone who thinks about what we buy, thinks about its impacts, where we can, in the case of fair trade, conscious consumer is making a choice to seek out those products that have that direction of travel. It's also an agent. I mean, it's conscious, it's a choice about consumption, purchase, how we spend our money, how we invest our money, companies we support. It's about advocacy. So it's a lot more than stuff in our faces, conscious consumption. It's actually about making the choice that will take us and other people, and more importantly, down a more supportive route, themselves and their communities. So it's an act of citizenship.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much to everyone who's joining. I'm going to be sending across resources to everyone. And as Peter said, you can take action and be a conscious consumer. It's all about taking that step to kind of think about what you're doing and how you can be a better global citizen. So if anyone wants to learn more about our conscious consumption campaign or about fair trade, you can find all of our resources on 10,000students.ie and fair trade at fairtrade.ie. But I'm sending on links to everything now. So all of those should be in the chat. If anyone wants to stay on and has any more questions, feel free. If not, I think we'll just wrap up everything. But thank you to everyone who came tonight.
Thanks, Madeline. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.